Welcome to a sharp and seaworthy debate about moral duty and the deep ocean. Our resolution states that, within the next few years, individuals have an ethical duty to volunteer in underwater citizen science to monitor impacts from looming deep-sea mining and other seabed activity. Think of coral gardens, strange bioluminescent life, and quiet plains of nodules that industry wants to harvest. International rules are evolving, and tests at sea are drawing both excitement and alarm across coastal communities and research circles. Citizen science is already helping track reef health, microplastics, and shifting fish populations using simple surveys, cameras, and new DNA sampling kits. Tonight, the emotion team argues for the resolution as the affirmative. The logic team argues against the resolution as the negative. We will begin with opening cases from each side, starting with the affirmative. Affirmative, you have the floor to present your case.
The ocean is our planet's life support, and when it falters, we all feel it in our lungs, our food, and our weather.
You can measure that love with action by volunteering to gather data that scientists and regulators urgently need.
When companies plan to vacuum the seabed for metals, the first thing at risk is knowledge, because damage outruns paperwork.
Surveys by trained volunteers have already spotted bleaching events and fish die-offs faster than official teams could arrive.
A duty exists when the stakes are universal, the tools are accessible, and the time window is closing.
Entry barriers are lower than ever, with free apps, open protocols, and local dive clubs partnering with labs for eDNA sampling.
If you can swim, snorkel, kayak, pilot a small drone, or simply tag photos from home, you can help document what we stand to lose.
Data from thousands of small efforts can reveal trends that a handful of expeditions would miss across vast and remote waters.
Some say, wait for perfect rules, yet communities near proposed mining zones cannot wait for perfection while sediment plumes may spread.
Citizen logs increase transparency by showing where plumes travel, how noise affects whales, and when rare species appear in harm's way.
Volunteering is not a hobby here. It is a promise to future people that we did not look away.
Moral duty grows when help is feasible, and the cost of silence is irreversible loss of species we have barely named.
This is not about blocking science or progress, but about shining light so choices are informed and reversible.
Public datasets make regulators more accountable, because decisions backed by open evidence can be audited by journalists and courts.
The ocean gives us oxygen, rain cycles, and calm, and love answers gifts with care, even when profit shouts louder.
Volunteer measurements are like seatbelts for policy, because they turn warnings into numbers that decision makers cannot ignore.
A duty shared by many becomes culture, and culture is stronger than any one company timeline.
Therefore, we ask you to affirm, because duty plus doable action equals hope with proof.
Thank you, affirmative. And now the floor moves to the negative for the opening case.
Duties must be precise and proportionate, and this proposal assigns a heavy moral label to an activity that requires expertise, safety training, and quality control.
Even small errors in sampling or location tagging can pollute datasets, leading to noisy signals that hinder rather than help conservation decisions.
Monitoring industrial impacts across the abyssal plain is not the same as counting birds at a city park.
Deep ocean work involves specialized equipment, strict dive protocols, and risk assessments that most volunteers are not prepared to meet.
If we declare a duty for individuals, we risk shifting responsibility away from governments, regulators, and corporations that hold the power and funding to act at scale.
The correct locus of obligation is institutional, because only coordinated agencies can mandate standards, audits, enforcement, and long-term stewardship.
Consider opportunity cost, since an hour of volunteer time might be better spent campaigning for a clear moratoria, demanding impact assessments, or funding professional surveys.
When budgets are finite, misdirected volunteer programs can cannibalize resources from trained teams and create a false sense of security.
Ethical urgency does not erase the need for reliability, because bad data can justify either reckless mining or unnecessary bans.
Quality assurance requires calibration, replicates, metadata management, and chain of custody that exceed typical citizen workflows.
We should encourage optional participation, but stop short of calling it a duty, which implies blame for those who cannot or should not dive.
An inclusive ethic recognizes caregivers, non-swimmers, people with disabilities, and workers without spare time, and does not burden them with a moral debt.
The right path is to demand strong international rules, fund independent scientific cruises, and build public dashboards that accept only validated inputs.
When projects do use volunteers, they should be tightly supervised, narrow in scope, and secondary to professional monitoring rather than the backbone of it.
Progress needs careful design, not crowd pressure. Therefore, the resolution confuses enthusiasm with obligation and should be rejected.
We urge a vote negative, so policy remains disciplined, evidence remains trustworthy, and duty stays where it belongs, at the institutional level.
Affirmative. Please take the mic for your first cross pressure.
If duty sounds heavy, remember that duty also means love scaled up, because when a child asks what the ocean tasted like before the mud clouds, we should have an answer that tastes like clean salt, not apologies.
Negative. Your brief rebuttal window starts now.
Compelling feelings do not certify methods, and unless sampling frames are representative, your crowdsourced love becomes biased heat maps that mislead policy and misallocate scarce protections.
Negative. Proceed directly to your proactive attack.
By framing volunteering as a duty, you create moral outsourcing, where ministries cut monitoring budgets and point at divers with GoPros, as if that replaces baseline acoustic arrays and benthic landers.
Affirmative. Your defense turn is open.
Duty here lifts budgets rather than replacing them, because public pressure, armed with open photos and timestamps, forces ministries to fund those arrays or face an electorate staring at proof.
Negative. Please advance to your planned two-speaker attack.
First, the resolution conflates coastline projects with abyssal operations, which sit beyond recreational depths and require submersibles with strict telemetry, not weekend fins.
Second, even coastal tasks suffer from confirmation bias, as volunteers seek drama and over-report anomalies, which inflates false positives and erodes trust in subsequent alerts.
Third, data stewardship is not a hashtag but a protocol, and unvetted uploads can expose endangered species locations to bad actors.
Finally, once duty language hardens, refusal becomes stigma, which is ethically reckless toward people with medical limits or multiple jobs.
Time, negative, and back to the affirmative for a partnered attack.
Leader here says that everyday eyes turn the ocean from a rumor into a record, because 1,000 shoreline diaries reveal plumes, dead zones, and bruised silence before quarterly memos do.
Support adds that platforms now integrate quality flags, cross-checks, and eDNA barcodes, so the crowd is not a crowd so much as a mesh that filters noise into signal with audit trails.
Hold, affirmative, and pass to the negative for a two-person defense with reply and challenge.
Answering directly, barcodes still depend on chain of custody, and unless custody is verified, a mislabeled vial can produce ghost species that skew mitigation costs.
Challenge to you. Will you accept criminal liability for volunteers who dive beyond training because your rhetoric of duty pushed them to treat risk like romance?
Affirmative, flaw for defense with reply and a surgical weakness read.
Reply first. Reputable programs cap depth, require certification, and pair non-divers with short tasks such as annotation, image triage, and drift modeling, which meet safety with inclusion.
Weakness in your case is the assumption that institutions act without a chorus, while history shows that institutions accelerate when citizens keep the tempo, so the chorus is not noise but the metronome.
Judges, please offer mid-round impressions.
I lean affirmative because I hear a rhythm of feasible action tied to urgency, while the negative sheet music is strong on structure, but sometimes plays too softly on human agency.
At this moment, I tilt negative, since their calibration and custody points feel under-answered, and I urge the affirmative to name concrete guardrails rather than poetic vows.
I remain undecided, noting that duty language is historically weighty, and I challenge both sides to translate ideals into governance that scales without scapegoating the public.
We reset for round 2 with fresh angles, and the first strike goes to the negative.
New line of attack. If metals from nodules actually reduce terrestrial mining scars and human rights harms on land, then blanket moral duty to resist seabed operations may, paradoxically, prolong worse suffering on shore.
Affirmative, your single-speaker defense.
Defense is simple. Duty to monitor is not duty to block, and honest monitoring is the only way to compare harms with eyes open rather than in the glow of marketing decks.
Affirmative, proceed with a solo attack.
If a company calls itself responsible, it should welcome many witnesses, and our duty is to be there with cameras and clean samples, so responsibility cannot hide behind press releases.
Negative, your single-speaker defense on that point.
Any welcome should be within regulated corridors, led by accredited teams, because unmanaged witness crowds risk interfering with instruments and vessel safety zones.
Affirmative, mount a partnered attack.
Leader argues that projects can publish live telemetry and turbidity feeds, so the public need not crowd decks, yet still watch in real time like a neighborhood weather radar.
Support notes that, when feeds go dark or drift from baseline, volunteer analysts flag anomalies quickly, and that collective vigilance deters corner cutting.
Negative, answer with your own partnered attack.
Leader asserts that live feeds without context generate viral misreads, where normal variability looks like crisis, which forces agencies into performative shutdowns.
Support adds that adversaries can scrub public dashboards with bots to infer sensitive operations, so transparency must be gated by threat models rather than applause meters.
Hold there, negative, and pass back to the affirmative for a partnered defense with reply and counter probe.
Answering. Open dashboards already succeed in weather, wildfire, and river gauges, with layered explanations, tooltips, and educator modes that reduce panic and teach patterns.
Counterprobe. If your fear is misread graphs, why not require agencies to attach plain language notes and office hours? Because informed citizens lower rumor, not raise it.
Negative. Provide a partnered defense with a direct answer and a pointed weakness callout.
Direct answer. Mandatory office hours are costly, and every hour spent in public Q&A is an hour not tuning instruments or reading raw tags for genuine outliers.
Weakness callout. Your model scales with enthusiasm, not budgets. So when novelty fades, your duty collapses into hollow dashboards that bureaucrats quietly ignore.
Affirmative, a single-speaker counterthrust before we move on.
The cure for apathy is habit, and duty names the habit so that schools, dive clubs, and coastal towns adopt a monthly ritual of checking, logging, and caring, like litter picks, but smarter.
Negative. One speaker to parry.
Habits that affect policy must be anchored in standards, not vibes, which means certification pathways, blind checks, and penalties for fabricated entries, none of which you have fully specified.
Affirmative. Specify under pressure.
Specification follows. Tier 1 is shore-based annotation with quiz-gated accuracy checks. Tier 2 is snorkel and kayak mapping with GPS validation. Tier 3 is dive sampling with dual verification. And all tiers feed a ledger where labs sign off before data turns public.
Negative. Quick analytic reply.
Even with tiers, enforcement costs remain, and the word duty still risks moralizing those who opt out, which corrodes civic trust over time.
Affirmative, calm and concise rejoinder.
Then we define duty as an invitation with dignity, where inability is respected and refusal without reason is debated like any public norm, from voting to recycling.
We continue, and I want fresh voices from both benches as we deepen the bench strength.
On attack, communities that log jellyfish blooms helped scientists correlate heat spikes with hypoxia, which in turn shaped warnings that saved fisheries income.
On defense, correlation is not causation, and fisheries policy built on correlations can bankrupt towns when the causal picture was incomplete.
Negative. Launch a crisp solo attack on governance.
If volunteers become de facto monitors, states will claim success without paying for full ecological baselines, and, 20 years later, we will discover that our archive is a quilt with missing winters.
Affirmative. Solo defense with practical amendment.
Then attach sunset clauses and baseline grants to every program, so volunteer layers sit on top of guaranteed professional transects, which keeps the quilt warm and complete.
Negative. Two-person attack. Leader then support.
Leader argues that heavy cameras and ROVs need insurance, and citizen mishaps create liability chains that chill proper science through institutional risk aversion.
Support adds that social media fame incentives can skew site selection to photogenic reefs, while muddy but crucial sites go unlogged, which biases the archive toward pretty places.
Affirmative, two-person attack in return.
Leader states that duty can be designed away from vanity by rewarding the unglamorous, like points for the same muddy transit every third Tuesday to build time series.
Support explains that grant makers can underwrite microinsurance and safety training, making accidents rarer and responsibilities clear rather than chilling.
Negative, two-person defense with answer and provocative counter-question.
Answer. Even microinsurance requires underwriting based on predictable practices, which the volunteer model resists by definition.
Counter question. If a plume crosses a volunteer flotilla, who commands retreat, and how will your distributed crowd obey a single risk officer?
Affirmative, two-person defense with direct answer and pinpoint critique.
Direct answer. Event protocols assign a single safety controller per site, and apps lock out uploads when the controller flags red, which coordinates retreat in seconds.
Pinpoint critique. Your image of a chaotic crowd ignores the present reality of organized clubs that already run standardized drills from pool to pier, with checklists.
We are past the midpoint of round 2, and I am calling for concise power lines only.
The ocean deserves precision, not passion masquerading as method.
The ocean deserves both, because precision without people arrives late and leaves early.
We will hear brief, targeted shots from voices we have not yet heard, starting negative.
Long-term custody demands paid archivists, not heroic weekends.
Equity requires not shaming those outside the leisure class.
Security audits must precede transparency, not chase it.
Hazards multiply when language outruns logistics.
Now, brief targeted shots from the affirmative bench.
Ritual builds memory, and memory builds stewardship.
Shared logs make invisible damage visible to courts.
Witnessing is not shaming. It is solidarity in daylight.
Logistics grow faster when people care enough to ask for them.
We pivot to new evidence riffs, negative first, single speaker.
A recent audit found that multiple marine apps failed basic validation checks, which suggests the stack is not yet fit for duty language that implies moral urgency.
Affirmative, single speaker defense with improvement path.
Then the duty is to fix the stack by open sourcing validators, publishing bad data rates, and paying bug bounties, which turns weakness into a to-do list rather than a stop sign.
Negative, single speaker attack on ethics.
Ethical triage matters, and energy spent on volunteer romance might be better diverted to lobbying for a global pause until impact models are credible.
Affirmative, single speaker counter.
Pauses without eyes become naps for accountability, while a watched pause stays a pause and does not slide into a quiet green light.
Negative, partnered attack, bringing in a fresh support voice.
Leader holds that duty must be universal to be duty, and your carve-outs collapse the concept into preference dressed in moral clothes.
Support extends that when a word loses edge, policy loses clarity, because rules written to satisfy blurred duties become vague and hard to enforce.
Affirmative, partnered defense with clear definition and field example.
Definition. Civic duties can be conditional, like jury service with exemptions, and this duty fits that family by allowing alternatives for those unable to dive.
Field example. Elders who cannot swim lead shoreline log circles and mentor teens, which multiplies accuracy and keeps wisdom in the loop.
Negative, closing volleys for this phase, leader then supporter.
Leader insists that your patchwork remains noble but not necessary, and duties should be few and unambiguous to retain moral force.
Support concludes that admiration for volunteers is warranted, yet obligation is unearned, so vote negative to protect clarity and competence.
Affirmative, closing volleys for this phase, leader then supporter.
Leader asserts that a living planet is the most unambiguous obligation we share, and tools now exist for ordinary people to keep score before damage hardens.
Support affirms that when data and care travel together, leaders lead better, cheaters cheat less, and future citizens inherit a ledger, not a legend.
Before we move to final focus later, we will log a rapid exchange to surface any lingering blind spots.
Who verifies that site coordinators are not activists cherry-picking impacts?
Independent labs rotate audits and publish randomization keys, so cherry orchards cannot grow.
Who ensures volunteers do not trespass into exclusion zones?
The app geofences uploads and pings the Coast Guard when lines are crossed.
Who pays for training when budgets tighten?
A small levy on permits funds scholarships that flow through local clubs.
Who protects sensitive species data from poachers?
Threat-modeled redaction holds coordinates until breeding windows close.
Who arbitrates disputes over conflicting readings?
A standing panel draws lots among universities to adjudicate and publish reconciliations.
Judges have already weighed in, and we will later return for their final scores after closings. Before we close any doors, I want to check whether either bench has fresh angles or unfinished business to air.
Yes, the unfinished business is whether we choose to be present when history gets written underwater, or whether we choose to read it later with regret.
Our remaining point is that presence without precision risks turning history into a scrapbook rather than a ledger that can guide law.
Presence can carry precision when we train, verify, and publish methods that teenagers can understand and elders can teach.
You still have not shown that your training scales across languages, seasons, and safety conditions without diluting standards.
Scaling is exactly why common playbooks exist, so that a diver in Florida and a kayaker in Cornwall follow the same simple steps with the same checks.
Common steps do not equal common competence, and the gulf between a checklist and a clean dataset is the size of the ocean you romanticize.
The gulf narrows when communities own the work, because people protect what they measure, and they measure better when protection becomes local pride.
Local pride is not a substitute for intercalibration, and intercalibration costs time, insurance, and staff that your duty rhetoric does not pay for.
Duty can fund the gap through permit levies, micro-grants to clubs, and a standing audit pool that turns enthusiasm into sustained capability.
Levies and audits belong to institutions, which is exactly why the duty should be institutional rather than individual.
Institutions move faster when people expect them to, and duty is how a culture sets expectations before harm outruns hearings.
Expectation without guardrails creates pressure, and pressure creates shortcuts, and shortcuts break both safety and science.
Guardrails are built into the tiers we outlined, with caps on depth, lockouts on uploads in red zones, and rotating independent sign-offs.
Your tiers remain an unfunded mandate wrapped in virtue, and that is not governance, but vibes with paperwork.
Call it virtue if you wish, but it is simply care with tools. And tools plus care is how ordinary people help the extraordinary places that feed their lungs.
Affirmative. You may swing once more with a focus strike.
If you fear bad data, then join us in building better training, rather than rejecting the volunteers who are already out there seeing plumes before any ship arrives.
Negative. Answer quickly and keep it tight.
We will join when the architecture is professional first and volunteer second, because ethics without order collapses into theatre.
Affirmative. Next voice for a crisp reply.
Order begins when people show up and ask for it loudly, which is why naming duty is not theater, but the opening cue.
Negative. One more needle point, and then we pivot.
Name the duty as civic curiosity if you must, but do not frame it as a moral debt that shames those who cannot pay.
We are close to closing statements, so keep this free exchange fast and factual.
The moral debt we speak of is owed to future people who will live with our silence if we do not monitor what we risk opening.
Future people also inherit the consequences of sloppy archives, which is why sobriety demands we resist duty language until systems mature.
Systems mature faster under watch, and the watch is most effective when it is many, not few.
Many without mission command produce drift, which is the oldest failure mode in field science.
Mission command exists in the site coordinator model, with clear stop signals and daily briefs that even first-time volunteers can follow.
Briefs still do not make a cardiologist out of a lifeguard, and your analogy keeps slipping from shoreline to abyss.
Our claim has never been that every person goes abyssal, but that every person can stand somewhere helpful on the shore-to-space continuum.
Helpful must be measured by outcomes, and your evidence relies on anecdotes and hope rather than trials with pre-registered metrics.
Then let us pre-register together and stop arguing that the witnesses should stay home while the crime scene evolves unseen.
We are not telling witnesses to stay home. We are insisting that marshals lead before amateurs crowd the tape.
We will cut the heat there and move to closing architecture, starting with the affirmative final focus from 2 speakers, one to sort facts and one to speak to the judges.
Here is the ledger of facts we put on the table tonight. Industrial interest in seabed extraction is rising. Environmental governance is tightening but incomplete. Citizen tools, from eDNA kits to photo apps, now exist with low barriers. Tiered protocols can cap risk and validate entries, and public data sets pressure agencies and firms to act within the lines.
To the judges, I say this. Call it duty, because the word raises the floor of care without lowering the ceiling of expertise, because it signals that ordinary people matter in the loop, because it invites inclusion via shore roles for those who cannot dive, and because it transforms bystanders into witnesses whose numbers keep leaders honest and timelines reversible.
Negative team, your final focus follows with 2 speakers, one to consolidate facts and one to speak directly to the panel.
Our facts are clean and cautionary. Deep operations demand specialized equipment. Quality assurance requires chain of custody and intercalibration. Duty language risks outsourcing costs to citizens and shaming those who cannot join. And poorly governed volunteer inputs can mislead policy, harm safety, and mask budget cuts under a veneer of civic virtue.
To the panel, I submit that respect for the ocean is inseparable from respect for method, and that ethics should sharpen obligations, not blur them. So reserve the term duty for institutions with the purse strings and enforcement teeth, encourage optional citizen inputs under strict supervision, and vote negative to keep science precise and responsibility where it can be held to account.
Judges, thank you in advance for succinct mid-verdict stating who you back and why, while recognizing both benches.
I vote affirmative because I heard feasible tiers linking ordinary people to verifiable outputs, while the negatives sometimes use the perfect as a gate to the good. And I applaud the negative for insisting on custody and calibration, which the winners must continue to build.
I vote negative because clarity around authority, liability, and standards was stronger on that side, and I commend the affirmative for humanizing urgency and sketching inclusive roles that I would like to see piloted under tighter controls.
I vote affirmative on the strength of the amended governance plan with site controllers, upload lockouts, and independent audits, which addressed my earlier reservations, and I commend the negative for discipline that will be essential if this public monitoring culture advances.
By a 2-to-1 decision, the affirmative carries the day, and the emotion bench takes the win. Congratulations to the winners who turned care into a framework that persuaded our panel tonight.
I am grateful, because this vote tells kids in coastal clubs that their notebooks can matter when paired with good rules and steady mentors.
I feel proud that we elevated care without erasing craft, and I invite skeptics to help write the next version of the playbook with us.
I respect the result, and I hope the winning design invests first in calibration so that the romance of the sea never outruns the rigor it deserves.
I learned that our disagreement is smaller than it sounded, and I want to see the duty framed with careful exemptions and sharp metrics, so no one is shamed and the data stay clean.
Thank you to both teams for fierce but thoughtful exchange, and to our judges for measured insight and steady hands. To everyone listening through to the end, thank you for giving serious time to a subject that hides under the waves but shapes the air we breathe. If this debate sparked you, then please tap like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a smart comment about what duty should mean in your town. If you wish to support our work, scan the QR code at the bottom right, or use the link in the description to make a donation that keeps these conversations swimming. You will also find links in the description to other shows from completely different series, which you may enjoy exploring next. Until next time, take care of each other and meet us again for another deep and lively debate.